So here what we're going to do is we're going to service the set of fuel filters on a 2020 F250, and you can see here how there's just diesel all over the bottom of this filter housing. Whoever put this filter housing on before put it on really way too tight. I mean, I had to go max out on my impact just to pull the 8mm bolts out of there. So I got to clean the connector, get a drain pan over here, just kind of, I'm going to start dump. It will eventually stop pouring out, but this is your drain right here to get everything out of that box, or else if you start pulling the 8mm, it's going to just drop out all over the place. So you got to drain so much, and then eventually after draining for a while, it's going to slow down. What I'm going to do now is start spraying some of the bottom of that housing and stuff off, because there's just, whoever put it on there really like sucked it down so tight that it kind of distorted where the lid was helping seal. You really just need to run this down until it gets snug, the bolts on it, and I give it a couple little taps past that just to make sure it's tight. But whoever put these on there really ran this stuff down really hard. It was kind of unnecessary. So just kind of going around cleaning everything off so I can prep it and start wiping the connector and stuff off now. In between screen, him recording and stopping, we ended up spraying it out with some contact cleaner and stuff just to make sure we got everything out of it. Just trying to do my best. The quick lane was unsure how to do this oil filter set, so I stepped in to try to help them, show them how clean I do everything and how I try to make sure everything's taken care of, especially emphasizing on that connector where it comes across that shroud down there. It will actually easily cut through those wires. You can already see how the shielding on the wire connector, what I'm doing is I'm pointing out that there's 2 8mm in the back and then there's 3 in the front right here, and that's how you drop this lower cover out. And I've got that electrical connector cleaned out for the most part, but I'm actually going to hit it with some cleaner here again off camera, and then pull the housing and everything out and actually clean the housing out real good. So it's kind of just going through the motion, showing you kind of what everything I'm doing here. Last time I did one of these filters, it's been a long time. I don't do any of the maintenance stuff anymore, but I was like, okay, yeah, sure, this is a perfect opportunity for me to show you how clean I do things, and I'd like for you guys to do it the same way, if not better if you can, so I just try to keep above and beyond cleaning everything off as I'm going, making sure nothing can actually get in the diesel, contaminate the filter, or anything like that. So at this point, the diesel fuel slowed down, almost not draining at all, and so I go ahead and lock that back closed. So now it's okay for me to go ahead and pull my bottom cover off. I got one more bolt over here in the corner, just trying to make sure that I got everything broke loose. Other than the one bolt, everything's good. And I've got one more, pull that off, and then drop the whole unit down. The bolts stay in the unit, so you don't have to worry about dropping them, or at least for me, they've never dropped out. And just be conscious of that front cover, because it'll try to catch and stop you from pulling this out, and you'll make a mess. You can see there's still some diesel inside the actual filter box itself. That little screen can tell you how dirty something is. It can tell you if somebody's been filter or actually changing their fuel filter like they're supposed to. But with this being a 2020, it's pretty clean overall. And that just showing you the hooks right there on the bottom of the filter on how they actually snap in sideways. You pull them back towards you and then pull the filter out, and then when you push it back in, those hooks snap back to the side. In the kit you get a new gasket and everything, so that's all going to be cleaned up and taken care of. New gasket, new filter. Here I'm just kind of wiping everything out, making sure everything's real nice and clean. So you'll see here how I actually drop the filter down and then I slide it sideways to lock it in. So now it's dropped in, slid sideways, it popped in, now it's good. Now we can take it back over to the truck and install it. Make sure you install it the same way you took it out. Okay, so we made it back over. Gonna slide it up in there, just straight up. Line up your bolts and stuff, get them started by finger. I don't use an impact when I do it. Just nice and easy by finger. All of them all the way around. Because I don't want to start it with an impact and then strip something out. Just trying to make sure I'm being careful while I'm doing it. And then right before everything's all said and done, I will actually try to spray the bottom off one more time just to get that residue from dirt and stuff going down the road, but it's almost impossible to get that stuff off of there. You just do the best you can. Just make sure inside where the filter and everything's at, that's the most important part. You want to make sure there's no debris and stuff in there. Outside, it's not so much, but I like to make sure my electrical connector's clean. And my actual wire harness, I actually add more to it most of the time because the wire shielding and stuff and the tape starts to come off and there's nothing to protect it anymore. So I will actually take some pretty heavy duty cloth tape and I'll tape it from the connector all the way back just to make sure as it's coming across the plastic shroud right there, you see the little U shape where the connector's at, the wire harness is. I don't want it to rub through that, so I beef everything up around that to stop that from happening. And here I'm just running everything up nice and snug, and then just a little tap, 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 tap. I've never had one come back leaking. This is how I do it. I don't like over tightening things like this. Just a personal thing. After doing so many of these, you end up realizing that something works for you to where certain torque specs cause things to be worse sometimes. Sometimes they're better. It just all depends. Here I go back wiping this connector off. I'm trying to be real conscious of this connector. I don't want any debris or anything in that to cause some kind of malfunction with it. Eventually I get everything nice and clean, snap back up, and then here clean it out one more time. But now I'm going to go around with some cloth tape and tape all the way up this harness and all the way back down this harness because I want to make sure this gentleman's wiring harness is protected down there, especially with it being exposed to the elements. I don't want to take a chance. If somebody used electrical tape, that'd be all right. I like cloth tape because cloth tape is very, very, very strong, and it keeps out moisture and stuff like that as well. So, and it adds a really thick layer of protection, so that edge of plastic right there where my hand keeps spinning around, that it sits in between. The plastic straddles the harness. I don't want it to sit there and bounce going down the road and possibly rub through. So this is just how I always do it. Tape everything back up. Then I cut my tape when I'm done. And so there, I forgot it was cloth tape. Try to rip cloth tape by hand. A lot of times you ain't ripping it. It's strong. So I'm looking for razor blade now. So now I've got everything trimmed up. It's all nice and snug. The harness is protected with that extra thick tape. I'm going to go ahead and plug everything back in. Nice and dry inside that connector, nice and clean. So that's it. That's all she wrote there. Now we'll put the vehicle back on the ground and do the upstream fuel filter on the engine itself. But you got to be very, very careful with that. Not to break any of the connections, and you got to know how to take the connections apart because you will break them. That's just me checking the housing to make sure there's no other contact point that's possibly missing. And then there I'm just feeling the base to make sure it's all slugged up real nice. Here's a connector that you put on your small line all the way on the left if it's not already installed. It's a way for you to protect the connection and not put so much stress on it. But this one already has the connector shell installed, so I don't have to redo it again. But basically right there it's showing you that it goes on the line side of the connector. There's a certain gap, but it actually only fits real good one way, so it's kind of hard not to put it in the right spot to begin with. Now we're going to go over to the truck. I'm going to point out it already has the connector installed, or the shell installed, so I'm not going to redo it again. And I'm just going to walk you through how I disconnect it. It's kind of difficult to do everything with one hand, but I'm able to get it. The old line was a hard line right here. This new line is a soft line, so that's kind of a plus. And then some of the lines actually tie into these big lines, and there's not a third port. It just all depends on what kit you're getting, what truck you have, and what updates they've made during those years. So here, this middle line is kind of tough to slide off, but I eventually get it slid off. And this back line is kind of tricky. I end up having to put the camera down for a second just to get the tab started. But those back tabs, the long ones that are closest to you watching, you actually push them in, slide down, push them in, slide down, and eventually the connector comes undone. See, I got that corner popped in and slid down a little bit, and if it'll stay just a hair. Again, trying to do this with one hand while recording. There's that one down, and then now you can kind of just wiggle a little bit, just nice and forth, not just back and forth, little by little by little twist, just little small twist. It'll work its way right off of there. started to come, but I gave up. I was getting nervous. So there it popped off. Just kind of lay these off to the side. This filter's already starting to come loose. There's a little hook on the bottom that has to line up back in the slot in the bottom of this container. So when I pull it off, you'll see me twist it. And that's so I can get that hook out of there. You're almost always going to spill a little diesel unless you put like little trans line caps or something on it. I spilled a little on the battery there. I had to come back and clean these areas up. I made sure they were real clean. Oh, but anyway, that's here nor there. It's okay. So now I'm going to drop this filter in here. Feel for the slot that the little tab on the bottom of the filter slides in. It's about the direction I have it right there. And then all of a sudden pops in, doesn't come back out, lines are ready to go on. I've had some of these that are so rotten and rusted that I've literally had to sand down the inside of these cups where these filters fit on the older models. It's a pain in the butt sometimes to get them to sit down in there, but you make it work. Grease the housing a little bit, sand the inside of the housing a little bit. So here I'm just putting all my connectors and stuff back on. And then I'm going to get back inside the vehicle, and so everything's snug, kind of pulling on everything, seeing if anything feels like it's going to come off. It's not. So I take that out of there. I clean up all the surface and everything. Get back in the vehicle, and I key cycle like 4 times. Key on, let it sit about 30 seconds, key off. Key on, let it sit about 30 seconds, key off. I do that 4 times. So I'm going to cut this here. 4 key cycles. Right at 4 key cycles, we're ready to start. All the fuel's primed and fired right up. Oil pressure came up immediately, and we are good to go. So now we let it run for a little bit and then check our filters and make sure nothing's leaking. It's been running real good. Started right up immediately after priming. I don't see any diesel fuel coming out of the bottom anywhere. The filter's nice and dry. The filter up top is nice and dry. Everything seems to be just perfect. Customer was happy with the work, satisfied with it, and the quick lane guys got to learn how clean I am when I do this kind of stuff, and I'd kind of like for them to be the same way. So a lot of them look up to me and at least listen to what I have to say, so I'm appreciative of that. But everything's dry, job well done. I hope this helps, guys. Thank you. Be blessed.